tremendous amount of credibility in the intelligence community because he doesn't make idle threats. So I don't know what the time frame is on. Forgive me, the time frame for that is on or off, but it appears it is going to be in the very near vicinity. Also, ladies and gentlemen, on the same disappearing websites, California is going to come under divine judgment. And according to the same individual, they are going to pick out actors and actresses who are prominent to make a statement against the wickedness of the West. Now, when I talked to Tom Bowerly, who, by the way, is a great interviewer, and in my opinion, one of the best talk radio hosts in the country, he was blown away when this appeared, and we first talked about it a little bit over 4 to 6 months ago. Then it went silent on this issue, but guess what? The great Satan now has got some problems, especially in Hollywood and in Hollywood. It's going to evidently be the gist of, or getting the brunt of judgment. Now, it's also fascinating that most of the dreams, visions, and pronouncements from even prophetic and watchmen, watchwomen all over the world, California is really due to get it, ladies and gentlemen. And it's, I don't know what it's going to be or how it's going to be, but let me say this. Again, I refer to a word I gave on the radio a number of years ago when I was asking the living God about this. He said, as to their sin, so will their judgment be. And I can only tell you this, that obviously I don't think there's anything else that, I really don't believe there's anything else that Hollywood and California can do to infuriate a holy God of heaven. I just don't know what it would be. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's fascinating that as we talk tonight on the radio, and I'm talking to you, and you're thinking, pondering, listening, whether you're believing it or not, that's up to you and prayerful consideration. I can tell you, point blank, that they are very, very, very obstinate and dedicated, they being the jihadites. And, you know, the New World Order guys that are in this country facilitating them, who have raised them up, have got to be just basically ecstatic. But I guess what? God's got a way of preserving the wicked unto the day of judgment. Well, I'm going to take a break so I can take some water. I hope I've answered some of your questions about Yellowstone. Again, please don't tell me what so-and-so says. I have read everything I believe there is to read. I'm not trying to be arrogant, and I have just come back from spending hours in the air photographing it. We'll be right back. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the second half of the Q-Files. I'm Steve Quayle. I've been getting a lot of phone calls, and for those of you that are watching the metals, I'm sorry, I'll do a better job of making sure that I give the prices out a couple times during the show. Today, gold is right now at $418.90. Silver is $764. Platinum is about $893, and palladium is $287. Now, what's fascinating is there was a bombshell that was released yesterday where Japan is reported to end its currency intervention. Now, let me explain this to you very simply. Economics are a mirror to your future because the men that control the money control your future. The men who withhold the money withhold your future. So remember this, Jesus Christ made the statement that the love of money is the root of all evil. Amsel Rothschild, the founder of banks as we now know them, gave this famous statement in history when he said, "Give me control of a nation's money, and I care not who writes its laws." I'll paraphrase that for you. If I control the purse strings, Congress and the Senate and all employees of the federal and states governments will basically lick my boots. So, ladies and gentlemen, what we have is the boot-licking agenda going on right now. Now, this is off of Reuters. Japan ends currency intervention. Japan has been buying our financial instruments, buoying us up and supposedly keeping the value of the yen down. But listen to this. Japan's £150 billion or $273 billion campaign to weaken the yen and strengthen the dollar has officially come to an end. The Times newspaper reported, citing experts at the Bank of Japan. The currency intervention campaign, which has provoked criticism of Washington, and deep concern in London is thought by Japanese officials to be no longer necessary because the country's economic recovery is gathering strength, according to the London Times. Bank of Japan sources said that they would intervene in the markets only when there was an extraordinary issue of volatility, but made clearly that the unprecedented dollar purchases of the past 7 months were formally over, the paper reported. Even if the market shows volatility, quote-unquote, we believe that things are not so fragile now, according to the Bank of Japan spokesman. We have reached the point where we are confident that the Japanese recovery no longer depends on export strength, and interventions have served their purposes. So what this means is the number one buyer of U.S. paper is no longer there. Now, there's an interesting phenomenon taking place. So some of you those of you who watch the euro has been kind of, let's say this, in nowhere land, and now we've got a situation where the euro it could be going down, and the gold could be going up, even though it used to be when the euro went up, gold went up. When the euro went down, gold went down. It's conceivable now that the euro can go down and gold can go up. In other words, there is coming a point, my guess is at the 438 realm to 458 realm, that's spot, $458, where you'll see a complete disjoining of them. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is a fabulous article. It's written by Tony Easley, and it's called Fears of Financial Bubble. And it's kind of interesting because it's saying, it's actually attenuating or illustrating the previous article. Here's what it says. Is there a risk the world economy could be destabilized by a dangerous new bubble forming in global financial markets? Australia's Reserve Bank seems to think so. It fears that low interest rates in all the key financial centers are luring investors into high-risk, high-yield investments. Actually, you could even say derivatives. And it's not alone. Members of the U.S. Central Bank are expressing similar concerns. Finance correspondent Stephen Long reports, the last time irrational exuberance, remember that's Greenspan's buzz, the last time irrational exuberance gripped the markets of the world during the tech boom, it created a stock market bubble of historic proportions. And when it collapsed, it inflicted extraordinary losses, destroying more than U.S. $7 trillion of wealth, more than twice the financial cost of the U.S. of World War II. $7 trillion. That's a lot of money that was lost. And critics hold the U.S. Federal Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan largely responsible. The journalist Peter Hatcher, author of a forthcoming critical book on Greenspan. Here's what Peter Hatcher says. In 1996, it was clear that there was a major bubble developing the U.S. stock market, which turns out to be the biggest in the financial history of the world. He knew, Greenspan, he had to do the right thing by suppressing it, repressing it, and managing it. And he started to do this with his speech, that famous line about irrational exuberance, but the political reaction was too hot, and he just backed off and decided not only would he let the bubble run, but he aggravated that then by becoming a cheerleader for something he knew was going to burst in ugly circumstances. Again, back to Stephen Long, the chief economist at Northern Trust Company in U.S., Paul Casriel also holds Dr. Greenspan responsible as the chief cheerleader for the bubble and the supplier of its fuel. Alan Greenspan aided and abetted the stock market bubble. You don't have asset price bubbles unless you have cheap central bank credit. Now authorities fear a dangerous new mania is gripping the world's capital markets. This is what the Reserve Bank says in a new report on financial stability. The search for yield by private investors has pushed down risk spreads for corporate and emerging market borrowers alike to levels last seen in the 1998 crisis. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, we are returning to the most explosive period of history financially when $7 trillion with a T dollars were lost, okay? It's a concern shared by members of the U.S. Federal Reserve's chief policy-making body, the Open Market Committee. The minutes of a recent Open Market Committee meeting released days ago make the concerns clear. They express a fear that the lowest interest rates in 46 years have contributed, quote, to valuations of financial markets that leave a little room for downside risk. I can tell you this, the Quayleism on that is all or nothing. Translation, you're going to love this. The markets are crazy. Now, you know, you can talk about as much economic theory as you want. You can add in formulas. You can quote cycles. You can quote Elliott Wave. I prefer Kondratiev. But the point that I'm trying to say is that the markets are crazy. And critics are once again holding Alan Greenspan at least partly responsible by holding rates so low for so long. Philip Lowe, the Reserve Bank's head of economic analysis and a world-renowned expert on market mania, this is what he told a seminar. The Fed's been very good at lowering interest rates quickly whenever it saw risk, downside risk to the macroeconomy, but it has not been willing to increase interest rates to reduce the probability of what it sees as a very bad outcome. It was not willing to increase interest rates to try and take some of the heat out of the stock market. Philip Lowe fears investors have come to rely on the Fed to save their skin. Now, investors have come to believe that the Fed will bail them out. The Fed will be very happy to cut interest rates whenever any problems come along, and that somehow reduces, either reduces or increases people's appetite for risk-taking. I think we're seeing some evidence of that currently in global capital markets. The trouble is, with interest rates so low, the U.S. budget deficit is so high, there won't be much scope to bail investors out this time. Now, ladies and gentlemen, last week I read to you a fascinating article. If you'll remember, it was basically Bernanke, Governor Bernanke, the Federal Reserve Board, was stating that the idea that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, the two largest holders of home loan mortgages in the world, would be bailed out by the government. You see, I can tell you up until that article, I was always under the impression, and had been told so by bankers and mortgage brokers, that the government was a lender of last resort. And so it's kind of more than curious that now, as all of these stories come out, people are starting really to worry. Now, I can tell you point blank, in a new Al-Qaeda issued battle plan, they're telling all of their adherents to sell the euro and buy gold. It's a pretty big story, everyone. It's a huge story, because it's got to be a wake-up call. If ever there's a wake-up call, I'm just telling you this, even Rip Van Winkle ultimately woke up, didn't he? And I mean, I think that's a fair statement to say that even Rip Van Winkle had to wake up. WorldNet Daily is reporting that, and it's kind of a very telling story, that Al-Qaeda now and the Islamic fundamentalists are telling all of their adherents to get out of the euro and get into gold. So for those of you that think that gold is not a major issue, listen, I'll make it real simple. You ultimately are going to be left with a kingdom of God versus a kingdom of darkness. You're going to be left with what God has made and redeemed versus what the devil has destroyed and deceived humanity since day one. And the battle is going to be very real. But there comes a time when gold and silver won't mean anything, because when God shows up on the scene in the day of the Lord, and the day of the Lord is after the tribulation is not the day of the Lord. The tribulation is the devil's war on the saints. I know a lot of you saints think you're going to be out of here. I would just plan to maybe make sure you're a wise virgin, have oil in your lamp. Go to Matthew 25 and check it out. There were a bunch of virgins, but 5 of them had a little extra, and the 5 that didn't have any oil came to the 5 that did have extra oil and wanted to have some of theirs. In other words, they were too lazy to go out and prepare for maybe bad times. Look, I don't know when it comes down. I don't know necessarily how it comes down, and I for sure don't know the outcome. I do know that God wins in the end, but I'm just telling you, all the charts and graphs are going to be a lot of embarrassed Christian novelists. There are going to be a lot of embarrassed loudmouth TV evangelists that when a lot of this bad stuff starts to happen, I don't know what they're going to do. That's kind of, I guess you'd say, my major curiosity. Because, again, if you look at the history of the church, if you look at the history of what the early church went through, and the church in the wilderness, which is basically those that followed God as they were led out of Egypt into Israel, the point is you've got to recognize that it isn't hunky-dory time. I mean, there's a battle going on. So again, ladies and gentlemen, I would just tell you point blank that I find it more than curious that at this point in history, the call of jihad has gone out and basically stated to everyone, get rid of euros, and go and get it. Go and get it. Get it meaning gold. So it'll be fascinating to me. Doug's new, somebody just sent me an email saying Doug's new computer is up and running fine, but Adelphia in Erie is working on their servers, so email is up and down. Doug will get out the new alerts, and we have, just so you know, HQ has got alerts going out. Now, ladies and gentlemen, those of you that have not subscribed to the HQ Intel alert, I would encourage you to do so. We have a plan now where you can basically, if you want, you can subscribe for $25 a quarter or $10 a month. We're not trying to exclude anyone, but if people have got a computer and they're on the computer, look, you know, we all have to decide what priorities are. We have a super alert coming out, and I got to share this with you. Remember I was telling you about the PhD guy that was giving us a lot of trouble? Well, lo and behold, Doug, and he did a fabulous job of busting the guy's identity. The guy showed up on national TV as an expert on terrorism, and he's tied in. He's been going around to nuclear power plants claiming to be this PhD, and the guy's a total phony. Lives at home with his mom, threatens everybody around the country, but he's in big trouble now. And Doug did a fabulous job of tracking him down. I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, we have a story to tell that is amazing, and it affected me and it affected him, and I got news for you. There are a lot of people up in arms because basically this guy was able, by faking it, to achieve a lot of what I would say very highly secure security procedures around nuclear power plants. So that PhD that was giving us a bunch of trouble that said you were all morons, he's a total phony, and he'll probably end up, because depending on who he is and where he is, I mean, what I'm saying, we know his real name, we know who he is. Right now he's gone into hiding, but this guy is bad news. So it's kind of fabulous to see point blank the effectiveness of the HQ Intel alert. And again, we'll be giving you this stuff as it breaks. If you want to order it, you can call me at 1-800-424-7870, 1-800-424-7870. Again, there are items and a lot of stuff in the newsletter that we simply won't say on the radio and we will not put on our website. So if you're interested at all, please give us a call at 1-800-424-7870. Let's see what this says. Nope, that's some of these are just totally unrelated what I'm talking about tonight. Nope. Don Lowe. Hi, Don. Thank you. Another fire. What does this say? Bob says, did you see Steve today? Another major fire in Kentucky. Seems like our fire response is being tested. Listen, all the stuff that we get is to basically, or we're seeing, are probing events. And this is why people say, well, why hasn't anything happened yet? I said, be patient, it will. Because these guys know they have one shot at it, and it's not going to be necessary to, how to say this, go on for an indefinite period of time without having to experience the major amount of activity. So I want to go to my email. I've got 2 email accounts right now, and I'm trying to get the ones. And by the way, the other day, over the weekend, I had 1,142 virus attempts. 1,142 virus attempts. Let's do here. Newsletter, Tim. Okay, I'll send that to Doug, Tim. Let's go here. Tom Miller, tonight's show. Okay. Now that, you know, ladies and gentlemen, some of this stuff is just, it makes me so upset when people think that, you know, I don't, it just makes me crazy. Nope, that's not either. Please, be specific with me, and I will try and answer you. Okay, Steve, if the Muslims are telling their people to get out of the euro and to buy gold, then how long before our government accuses America of supporting terrorism if we buy gold and silver? Good question, Tom. The only problem is America will be forced to adopt some form of specie themselves. And the point is that we are in big trouble because the real reason is that we have no gold in Fort Knox. If you understand how Bill Clinton and his entire administration took all the gold, basically sold it to the bankers, and let them use the gold, the bankers then lended it out through their bullion banks, and now the people who had the gold sold it cheap, and they are in an IOU phase, we're in big trouble. I think the meltdown is going to happen so fast and so quick that everyone is going to be amazed at just how it proceeds. I think I told you that a gentleman who called me, who listens to the show, was telling me that he was in Southeast Asia and watched literally people buy their lives and their way out of Southeast Asia, Laos and Cambodia, during the Khmer Rouge time, with little pieces of gold. Over there they sell like little sticks of gold that are scored. In other words, they have little slices of them. You just break off a piece. And he said it was interesting. He said, no one can ever convince me that, it won't have its place in difficult times. Now, here's what Brian says. Let's say this. Steve, good question. Yellowstone may not be ready to blow naturally, but for some reason they have managed to make people talk about it a lot. Could this be a cover for something unnatural they have planned? Do you think they would gain anything by causing an eruption and martial law? Well, no, Tom, and because I don't have time, I'm sorry, Brian, no, not at this point, but let me share this with you. Again, when you're focusing electromagnetic radiation, and when you're bringing the different waveforms together in what Stan Deo explained to me, I asked him, I said, Stan, what are interferometric patterns? And basically, these are waves that interfere with each other and reverberate, let's say, and come back into a place where the energy is concentrated, what's called a standing wave. For instance, you stir a paint bucket, and this is Stan Deo's illustration. You stir the paint bucket, and as the paint goes out towards the container walls, then that force obviously comes in, and as you know, if you stir it fast enough, it starts to climb up the stick. In other words, it starts to build up energy, and it becomes taller, and can become taller than the bucket. You know, he said you can take a drill with one of those mixers in it, and you can watch it really easily. So what I'm trying to say to you, Brian, and everybody else is this, is that if they're going to use scalar weaponry against volcanoes, they'd probably go after the Long Valley caldera. And the reason why they go, that's in the Mammoth Mountain region of California, the reason they do that is because if they set up severe seismic disruptions, they could pretty much destroy, they could flood the entire Fresno Valley with ocean water, and it would destroy, California's produce capabilities. And it's an amazing thing at how little of a barrier, I think it's less than 2 feet of limestone, separates the entire Fresno Valley, which, by the way, once was an inland sea, from the ocean. So what I'm saying is the benefit, the amount of energy necessary, and the benefit would be to focus on a more obvious area. This may be what I think is being intimated in the different Vanishing Jihad forums concerning California. And this is, they're going to really, really make it obvious that it was them when they do it. Let's see this. Steve, this is Stacy. Here in Tampa, Florida, we're seeing a lot of spraying, but I have a question on not being outside. How long are we talking about? Because we see them spraying, can watch a chemtrail spread and turn into a dense cover. Sometimes this lingers for hours. It would mean staying in all day. I'm not saying you have to stay in all day. I'm just saying if you got to go out, look, put those masks on, even the N95s, even a paint mask or something. Because, again, here's the thing. Would you rather look stupid? And somebody said, well, I don't want to look stupid. Or I said, do you want to look dead? And, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know the composition. There are people who are very smart working on the composition, but what they're telling me is the contents of the spray has changed dramatically. And I can't even begin to fathom. I'll have to think about it because I just heard about this a couple hours ago, thanks to, again, my listeners And it becomes imperative that we begin to take active measures. Look, if active measures are being used against us, then I don't think it's stupid to be wearing a mask. And again, ladies and gentlemen, if you want the charcoal mask, please, it's not a pitch for the mask. Get them any place. Go to your store and get an N95. I don't care where you get them. Just get them. And so if you're going to be outside, you're going to have to wear a mask. It's as simple as that. And again, I'm sorry that it has to be that blunt, but I can only tell you that we have been getting sprayed night and day up here in Bozeman, Montana, and it's a major, major assault. Just a major assault. Here's one from Rick in Florida. He says, with the announcement of Iran being so close to making nuclear weapons, is there a distinct possibility of Israel launching a preemptive strike on their weapons plan? Yes. World War III, just a blast away. I'm really interested in the info you have about the content of chemtrails. I'm enjoying the HQ Intel alert. Many thanks to both of you and Doug. Again, ladies and gentlemen, the reason why we had to go to the HQ Intel alert is because, you know, when Doug was getting the amount of hits he's getting on his website, and I'm getting the amount of hits I'm getting, and we see they're all coming from the United Arab Emirates and stuff, that ought to tell you that someone's paying attention to us. You know, amazing, amazing to me. Here's one from Debbie in Port Angeles. She says, Steve, just dropping a line to say hi and thank you for all you're doing to keep us informed. The girls and I just finished planting some of the seeds you sent us. Again, thank you and God bless you. Well, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to send me your questions tonight for tomorrow's show, okay? Steve, 777 at stevequayle.com. I'll go right into it because I got about 10 or 15 emails, and I think it's important. I will have the report on the chemtrails. I'll read it to you tomorrow. Good night, everyone.